So let's cultivate our motivation and take a really broad picture of the situation, considering not just our own wants, our own preferences, our own needs, but broadening our mind and considering the welfare of all living beings, no matter who they are, and not developing solid conceptions about them, because they change from life to life. Our relationship with them changes from life to life. The basis upon which we designate a person, their person, changes life to life. They don't have any findable soul or self, but they still want happiness and freedom from misery, just like us. And so since we've met the Dharma, let's really have the intention to use this opportunity as much as we can to create virtue, purify non-virtue, learn and practice the Dharma, so that we can be of the most effective and skillful benefit and service to all these living beings. Okay, so we've been going through approaching the Buddhist path for a while. We just finished the chapter on loving kindness and mind training, and now we're going to begin chapter 8, which is called A Systematic Approach. So this chapter is talking about various ways of organizing the teachings, because as most of you probably know, the Lamrim is one way of organizing the teachings. Now, the structure was set up, general structure was set up by Atisha, and then all 4 Tibetan lineages have their own version of that. But in addition to that, there's other ways of structuring it. And even with the Lamrim in this series, we're not always following the typical structure. There's sometimes where we've changed the order because it seems to fit the modern audience better. Okay, so in this chapter, His Holiness is going to talk about different ways of kind of structuring the teachings so that we can get this worldview. And the reason why this kind of world or general take on all the Dharma teachings and how they fit together, why that's important, is because you may have noticed at Dharma centers nowadays, there may or may not be a resident teacher. If there is one, you have some classes. The classes may be on a particular topic, and you may learn that topic well, but you don't necessarily learn how it fits in with other topics. And then in addition, you have visiting teachers that often arrive on Friday, give a teaching on Saturday, an initiation on Sunday, and fly out on Monday. And you're going, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? What in the world is an empowerment or an initiation? Or even the Lama didn't give that, gave 4 or 5 days at the most teachings on a particular topic. And so one weekend you hear about bodhicitta, the next weekend you hear about the faults of samsara, the next weekend you hear about Amitabha's Pure Land, the weekend after that you hear about the 20 Sangha, the weekend after that, you hear about, what else is there? The form and formless absorptions and how to develop concentration. And so you're getting all these little bits of teachings, but you're going, how do they fit together, so that I can practice all of them? I get so many teachings, but how do I put them together and construct a practice? And what order am I supposed to practice them in, and how do they fit? So, that's one of the beauties of the Lamrim teachings, is it really systematized and ordered that. And, often they teach us the Lamrim. I remember when I was learning it, they were saying, we have the Buddhist teachings, and then we have the treatises and commentaries by the great Indian Pandits, and then we have the Tibetan commentaries, okay, and then we have the Lamrim that distills all of that into the essential thing. What they don't always tell us is that the Lamrim was actually constructed for people who had done all of the philosophical training of the Geshe program, who now wanted to go meditate, and it was drawing out the most important points for them to meditate on in sequence. They don't always tell us that. Yeah, and so when we start practicing the Lamrim, for us, many of the topics seem quite advanced because we grew up in a very different culture. And the Lamrim assumes you believe in rebirth. It assumes that you have respect for spiritual mentors. It assumes that you're a Buddhist. That's really basic, It assumes that you're from Tibetan culture. And, that doesn't fit us, okay? So that's why this particular series, The Library of Wisdom and Compassion, was written, to try and get something that fits a modern audience that did not grow up in a Buddhist culture, okay? And also His Holiness included in that young Tibetans. Because, and I understand why, because on a few occasions I've taught in the Tibetan schools in India, and the teenagers there ask questions very similar to the ones that Westerners do, And I've been so surprised, when a Tibetan says, how do we know that the different realms exist? It's like, oh, wow, you wonder about that? And, it's an important question. Okay. And so also I remember when I was learning the Lamrim, we were told that all these great treatise writers and commentators and so on distilled what was important, and all we had to do was learn that. With emphasis, that. And, that it was, they said that the Buddha's teaching was like the raw cotton, the Indian Pandits were like the cloth, the Tibetan commentators were like cutting out the cloth and stitching it into a ready-made garment. So when we learned the Lamrim, we were getting the ready-made garment. All we had to do was learn it and practice it, and that was it. Okay, but that isn't really in the spirit of the Buddha's teachings, because the spirit of the Buddha's teaching is to question things. and to debate and to go back and forth and say, is it really like this, or is it, in another way? But that hasn't been so emphasized in the Lamrim teachings, although it's very clear when you teach a group of Westerners that they ask questions that Tibetans don't ask. And this can sometimes be quite embarrassing for both parties, because you're trying to explain a question to a Tibetan Lama who is like, is coming from a totally different space. Yeah. So I think we need to come back again to having more discussion, and not just it's a ready-made suit and all we need to do is learn it and practice it. But, what do these really mean? How does it apply to our life? How do we enact it in our culture? Yeah. Old Tibet, pre-1959 Tibet, very different than now, And as you see, we get all sorts of emails from people asking us how to apply the teachings, especially in the age of Trump. So they'll probably talk on it. I have a question, another question that somebody sent in, and we get a lot of questions like this. It's like, the world is like this now. How in the world am I supposed to practice? Because it isn't just a thing of, going and sitting down and learning the teachings and having your own peaceful meditation anymore. It's, it's a different situation where we have to be more active. And, I think about Tibet, the pre-1959 Tibet, and they really needed to be more socially involved at that time and more active and more knowledgeable about world affairs than they were. The 13th Dalai Lama was. He was very farsighted, very progressive. But aside from that, they had their own little place at the roof of the world, and they thought, the idea that anybody would invade and occupy it was 10 million miles away from their mind. They never considered that, never thought of it, So that's when, the time they could have joined the League of Nations. Nobody cared. Nobody even wanted to know. Yeah. But had they joined the League of Nations, after the First World War, it would have been a completely different ballgame when the Chinese communists marched in, because they would have been already established as an independent country. As it was, China said they weren't. They've always been a vassal of China, and we've had an amban there for the last 200 or 300 years. So, you can't say we're occupying your country. You were never your own country. Yeah? And so you have these kinds of things where, what's going on in the outside world is going to influence our ability to practice the Dharma. There are certain historical times you just go up to the mountains, you stay in your monastery, everything's peaceful and smooth, and there's not going to be a lot of interferences from outside. But, Tibet faced that from, about 1950 until the present. And who knows what we're going to be facing in terms of what is happening in this country now, and the populism worldwide, and how are we going to practice during all of that. So all of these things, different approaches to understanding the Dharma, different systematic approaches. And then also, what kind of things do we need to emphasize in today's world so that we can cope with the situation, the karmic situation we're born into. Yeah? Because it's not just, the peaceful world, well, it was never so peaceful after the Second World War, but it was a lot more peaceful than it is now, I would say, So, how to put all the teachings together in our minds. Okay, so, chapter 8, His Holiness starts out, awakening refers to the ultimate qualities of the mind. The path to awakening eliminates the impediments and enhances the qualities leading to this state. Tibetans translate Bodhi, the Sanskrit word for awakening, as Jangchub. Jang means to cleanse, and in this case refers to true cessation, the cleansing or elimination of afflictions, their seeds and latencies. Chub refers to having cultivated all positive qualities. Jang highlights the Buddha's abandonment of all faults, while Chub denotes their qualities and realizations. So when the Tibetans translated certain Sanskrit words into Tibetan, they often, gave a literal translation, and other times they gave words that expressed the qualities of the object that they were translating. Okay, so here Jang Chub, to cleanse and to develop. So to cleanse away all the hindrances, all the afflictions, all the obscurations, to develop all the good qualities. The word for Buddha is Sangye. Sang, again, has to do with cleanse and clean, and Ge means to expand or develop. So again, the same kind of meaning, cleaning away all of the defilements and developing, expanding all of the good qualities, so that there's, when you look at the etymology of a certain word, there's a lot of meaning behind it, like the word for refuge is kunchok, but kunchok means rare and precious. It doesn't mean refuge. It means something that's rare and precious. What is rare and precious? The 3 jewels. So they're called kunchok sum. The 3, sum is 3, the 3 precious and rare ones. Okay? So, so there's this kind of thing, etymology that the Tibetan translators did. Awakening is not granted by an external being, but is attained through the process of cleansing and cultivating our minds. Okay, so this we have to really get into our heads. We have to cleanse and cultivate our own minds. The potential to attain it is already within us. The nature of the mind is clarity and cognizance, so the capacity to perceive all phenomena is already there. We need to eliminate the obstacles to doing so by realizing the empty nature of all phenomena. So that's one paragraph. As Holiness just told you the whole path. Okay? This is what makes a great teacher. Somebody who can synthesize everything in a short way and who can expand it, in a long way. So newcomers to Buddhism occasionally ask me what it feels like to be awakened. People go up to the Dalai Lama. I hear you're Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion. Is it true? Are you really a Buddha? What's it like? And they expect His Holiness to say, well, yes, I am a Buddha, and it's like this, But His Holiness doesn't do that. He says, I'm just an ordinary monk. No more, no less. Okay, and that shows His unique qualities. Okay, so he says, I don't know, but I think it must be a sense of deep satisfaction and fulfillment due to knowing reality. So when we say, where are we going? We want to attain enlightenment. What's it going to feel like? Yeah, a sense of deep satisfaction and fulfillment due to knowing reality. To use an analogy, when we are ignorant about something, we feel uncomfortable and try to understand it. Once we have understood it and that obstacle has lifted, we feel tremendous relief. We feel pleased because we are fully confident that our understanding is correct. When we become fully awakened, we will directly realize all that exists. So imagine the deep satisfaction that we will experience then. This gives us an idea of the mental joy a Buddha experiences. One way I think of, what awakening might be is, you never get angry, no matter how somebody treats you. You're never offended. You're never insulted. You're never angry. You never feel that people were unfair towards you. Yeah. You don't resent others. You're not jealous of others. When I think like that, it's like, wow, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, so people could say whatever they want, they could do whatever they want, they could be as bigoted, as hypocritical, as insulting, as harmful, and your mind is just like a smooth, placid lake. Yeah, doesn't shake, doesn't move. Yeah, you have compassion for them. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So the next section is called Paths for Spiritual Development. So here he's going to start with different ways of organizing the teachings. To attain a Buddha's qualities, we need to develop many diverse aspects of our body, speech, and mind. This is important. He says this many times, that our mind is very complicated. So one type of meditation alone is not enough to transform our entire mind. Like he said here, we need to develop many diverse aspects of our body, speech, and mind. Yeah, so it's a whole process. It's not one simple meditation that's going to clear everything. Yeah, because there's a lot to transform, a lot to develop. Throughout the ages, Buddhist masters have used various paradigms that set out a progressive path to do this. And in this chapter, we will explore some of these. These step-by-step presentations outline a systematic path that allows each person to practice at his or her own level and progress in a comfortable and gradual way. So we are not competing with anybody else to see who can learn the most, who can gain the realizations first, who's going to sit on the highest throne, who's going to say, I became a Buddha before you. You always were competing with me, being one up. You thought you were so good because you were ordained before me, and I just became a Buddha before you. Okay. So, yeah. So there's none of that, yeah. We're not competing with anybody. It's not a contest. And we have to practice the path on our own in a way that feels comfortable to us. And it may be different than how our friend practices. Yeah. And we go at different rates, and we may emphasize different topics because we have different problems. Okay? So the whole idea of comparing and competing, throw it out. Yeah, it doesn't fit here. We'll begin with Aria Deva's presentation of 3 stages of the path. So here's a quotation from the 400 stanzas. Aria Deva. So Aria Deva is what, 3rd century? 2nd, 3rd century? Long time ago. He said, first prevent the demeritorious. Next, prevent self. Later, prevent views of all kinds. Whoever knows of this is wise. Okay? So this verse may be understood in 2 ways. In the first way, the first line, first prevent the demeritorious, indicates the necessity of abandoning the 10 paths of non-virtue and practicing the 10 paths of virtue in order to prevent an unfortunate rebirth and to gain a fortunate one. So the first thing, prevent the demeritorious, practice the basic foundational ethical conduct of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, practicing the 10 virtues, purifying, too. Then the second line, next prevent self, means to abandon grasping at the coarse self of persons, a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Okay, so this is one of the many ways in which we misunderstand who we are. But this is a comparatively coarse or gross way at understanding it. Okay? While abandoning this grasping for a self-sufficient, substantially existent person does not bring arhatship or Buddhahood, it does stop the coarse afflictions, which is beneficial. So just negating the self-sufficient, substantially existent person is not enough to attain liberation, but because it abandons the gross grasping, then it abandons the gross defilements that arise out of that gross grasping at persons. Okay, so that's the second line. Then the third line, later prevent all kinds, views of all kinds, indicates realizing the emptiness of true existence and employing this wisdom to eradicate all afflictions from the root. So this is the wisdom that negates the subtlest erroneous projection we have on how things exist, which is thinking that they're truly existent or inherently existent. So you see the progression. First, abandon the gross negativities, get your ethical conduct in order. Second, overcome the grasping at a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, and then that subdues the afflictions that come with that. And then third, go deeper into how things exist and realize the emptiness of all persons and phenomena, and use that realization, that wisdom, to completely cleanse the mind of all defilements. Okay? So he's setting out those 3 steps. So if you look at the traditional Lamrim, the first one is kind of like the path of the initial level being, who's striving, who wants to get a good rebirth. The second one is kind of like the middle level person. When you take the 4 noble truths as they're commonly accepted across the board in all tenet systems, where you're negating not inherent existence, but just a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. And then the third, it would be like the prasangika view that you would learn as in the third level. Okay? the advanced practitioners. Okay, so that's one way to understand Aria Deva's verse. Okay, the second way to approach this verse is to start with the final goal and work backwards. So this is another one of His Holiness's specialties. He'll take you on a causal thing going forward, and then he'll take you on the causal thing going from the result back to all the causes, that brought that result. Okay, so we're going backwards. So to attain full awakening, all cognitive obscurations must be eradicated, as indicated by later prevent views of all kinds. So that would mean eradicate the cognitive obscurations. Okay, so remember, the cognitive obscurations are what prevent having omniscient mind. Yeah, so they're the latencies of the afflictions and the subtle dualistic view that they cause. Okay, so to eliminate these, and here he's going to go into Tantra, it is not sufficient to contemplate the object clear light, which is the ultimate nature, emptiness, okay, based on subtle dependent arising. So it's not sufficient just to contemplate emptiness based on subtle dependent arising. You're going to go, what? But that's the final view of the Prasanghikas. What are you doing telling me that that's not sufficient? Okay? So from the viewpoint of highest yoga tantra, that's what he's talking from now, we must make manifest the subject clear light, the subtlest mind that arises after the 80 conceptions and 3 appearances have dissolved, and to use it to realize suchness. So he's saying just refuting inherent existence and realizing emptiness is not sufficient. You have to do it with a specific kind of consciousness. It can't be the comparatively gross consciousness of the unity of serenity and insight that all levels, of practitioners gain. It has to be the subtlest mind that is made manifest through the tantric practice. That mind has to realize emptiness in order to cleanse the mind of all defilements completely. Okay, that's what he's saying. And so that mind arises after the 80 conceptions and 3 appearances have dissolved. So when the mind gets more and more subtle, you have different stages. There's a stage of 80 conceptions that dissolve, 3 appearances that dissolve, and then after all of that, you get to the subject clear light, the fundamental innate clear light mind. Okay? And use that to realize suchness. Prior to this, okay, so that's the ultimate thing we need to do, okay? Prior to this, we must realize emptiness and eradicate the afflictive obscurations as indicated by next prevent self. So we just started with the third view, now he's doing the second view, okay? So the second view, next prevent self, means realizing emptiness and eradicating the afflictive obscurations. Yeah. The later prevent views of all kind is eliminating the cognitive obscurations that are much more subtle. So he's working backwards. Okay. So in order to do this, in order to remove the afflictive obscurations by realizing emptiness, okay, we need a continuous series of good rebirths in which we can practice the Dharma. The way to attain these is to first prevent the demeritorious, the 10 paths of non-virtue. Okay? So both ways you can see there's some overlap, but also some difference in the presentation of these two ways, okay? In Lamp of the Path, Atisha sets out 3 stages of the path according to 3 levels of practitioner: great, medium, and initial. So now he's going to go into another way of organizing the teachings. The path of the person of great spiritual development eliminates the cognitive obscurations so that he or she can become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings most effectively. This individual aims for the highest, longest-lasting bliss and peace for self and others, full awakening, and thus wants to extinguish dukkha and its causes for both self and others. Yeah, so that's a pretty big thing to bite off, isn't it? Eliminating dukkha and its causes, not only our own, but that of all other beings. The cognitive obscurations that impede full awakening are the subtle latencies of ignorance and the appearance of inherent existence that they create. To remove these, a person must cultivate bodhicitta, practice the 6 perfections, and unite serenity and insight on subtle emptiness. This is the path of the practitioner of great capacity. So here again, he's starting at the end and going backwards, So the person who is the highest level of spiritual capacity, who is, almost at the point of enlightenment, they have to eliminate the cognitive obscurations. So, because they're seeking full enlightenment for self and others, what do they need to do to eliminate the cognitive obscurations? Okay. They need to cultivate bodhicitta, practice the 6 perfections, unite serenity and insight on subtle emptiness. Okay? And, of course, enter the Tantra, but he's not spelling that out here. Okay? The path of the person of medium spiritual development, so this is the next lowest grade, eliminates the afflictive obscurations, which are the afflictions, their seeds, and here it says, and the polluted karma that causes rebirth in cyclic existence. I'm not sure that is an afflictive obscuration. It's definitely part of the second noble truth. Yeah, but for example, arhats, they still have the seeds of karma that will cause rebirth, but those seeds can't ripen because the afflictions have been eliminated. So write that down. We have to check that point, okay?
And according to who is that? According to who is that?
Who is?
What school holds that the Arhat still have the...
I think everybody holds that. Yeah? So this person, the middle capacity person, seeks liberation, the peace of nirvana that is free from the cycle of uncontrolled rebirth. So arhats have not eliminated all karma. Buddhas have, or karmic seeds, I should say. Yeah? Buddhas have, but arhats have not. Yeah? But they can't ripen. So to do this, he or she practices the 3 higher trainings, okay, higher training in ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, motivated by the determination to be free from cyclic existence and attain liberation. Okay. The path of the person of initial spiritual development eliminates coarse negativities, such as the 10 paths of non-virtue: killing, stealing, unwise and unkind sexual conduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh words, idle talk, covetousness, malice, and wrong views. Okay, so again and again, in both ways of talking about Aria Deva's verse, in this way of talking about of the way that Atisha set up, Everybody starts with following the law of cause and effect and eliminating the 10 non-virtues. Yeah? These 10 cause unfortunate rebirths in the future, as well as constant problems in this life. The beginning practitioner seeks the happiness in cyclic existence that comes from pacifying her gross mistaken thoughts, words, and deeds. Okay? So an ordinary person might just seek the happiness in cyclic existence from doing this and think about it only in this lifetime. But really, to be a Dharma practitioner, that light, you have to think about future lives and be wanting to attain a good rebirth in the future life. Okay? To express this path in a forward sequence, now he's going to change and go forward, okay, a practitioner must first and most urgently reduce his or her gross afflictions and harmful actions and practice the path of the 10 constructive actions. Okay? Although his ultimate goal may be nirvana or awakening, he must first deal with the most blatant obstacles to happiness by taking a defensive stand against them. He must especially prevent taking an unfortunate rebirth that would forestall his being able to practice the path for a long time. So you'll remember when we studied Precious Garland, Nagarjuna was saying there's two things. One is your a good rebirth. The second is your what we called it. We translated it differently. Higher rebirth and highest good. Yeah, we did it, but where both parts had highest in it. Yeah. And so faith, remember, was the cause for upper rebirths because you had to have faith and understanding about karma. And wisdom was the cause for the highest good, which is liberation and awakening. Okay, so the first level, got to have a good rebirth because if you don't have a good rebirth, you can't do anything. Yeah, you're really shot. So, the most urgent thing we need to do is make sure we create the causes for a good rebirth and purify any causes for a bad rebirth. Yeah, because once you're born in the lower realms, very difficult. Yeah, very difficult to get out. So why we have a precious human life, that's why it's so important to practice especially ethical conduct. And we're on the eve of doing EML, and what is exploring monastic life all about? The Pratimoksha precepts, which are, one of the foundations which are the foundation of ethical conduct. The second level, so the first level was getting a good rebirth, okay, by practicing abandoning the 10 non-virtues, practicing the 10 virtues. The second level is the actual combat, going on the offensive to destroy the afflictions. So the first one was defensive. Don't let the afflictions run your life and knock you off the path. And this is going on the offensive. A practitioner who is victorious over the afflictions attains nirvana. The third step is to remove the latencies or stains left on the mind stream by the afflictions. Having eliminated these, the practitioner becomes a fully awakened Buddha. Okay, let me read the next. Let's look at the chart, okay? So you can see the level of practitioner, initial, middle, and advanced. Yeah, the direct aim. What's the principal purpose of the initial? Fortunate rebirth. Of the middle, liberation or arhatship. Of the advanced, full awakening or Buddhahood. Okay, what do you practice as an initial level being? Pacifying coarse, harmful thoughts, words, and deeds, and practicing the 10 virtues. Okay? And what you're eliminating is the 10 non-virtues. For the middle level being, that person seeking liberation, you have to do the 3 higher trainings, which again includes ethical conduct. Now, that's the first of the higher trainings. And what you eliminate is the afflictive obscurations, the afflictions, their seeds, and polluted karma causing rebirth and samsara. That last part is what we're going to check. Okay, then the advanced level practitioner, what they practice to attain full awakening, the 6 perfections, the 4 ways of gathering disciples, and Vajrayana. Okay, and what they eliminate, the cognitive obscurations, which are the latencies of the afflictions and the appearance of inherent existence. Okay, so these charts are very helpful. It's laid out very nicely, and if you can remember all of this, it's really helpful, because then when you hear different teachings, you kind of know where to put them in this whole scheme. Yeah. And then we also know that, we ask ourselves, well, am I an initial level being, a middle level being, or an advanced being? Yeah. Have I accomplished what an initial level being sets out to do? No. Okay, so then we know what we have to emphasize, okay? The thing is that because we want to start the path out with the ultimate goal of attaining full awakening, but we start practicing where we're at, and we plant seeds for the higher stages. Okay, but it's very important to practice where we're at, because if we just say, okay, well, the highest thing is Tantra, so I'm just going to practice Tantra and learn Tantra, but you haven't done the practices of the initial and middle level capacity beings, your tantric practice is not going to bear the kind of results. It's not going to lead you to enlightenment, because you're constructing the roof before you build the foundation and the walls. Okay? So it doesn't mean that we don't do any of the high-level practices. We plant seeds for those, but we have to really make sure that we take care of the foundation practices. Because if we don't get another human life or rebirth in the Pure Land next time, then, we're in trouble. Okay? So we really need to make sure that we do that.
So someone asks, if one has a mind that aspires for full awakening, does that necessarily mean that one has conquered the 10 destructive actions and doesn't struggle with them?
No. It means you have that long-term motivation. And when you do the practices of the initial level being, you can bring in that advanced level motivation, because your ultimate aim is there, even though you're practicing here. Okay, so let's say I want to go from here to Delhi. Yeah, my ultimate goal is Delhi. But right now, I can't think Delhi, kind of plan how I'm going to get from the airport to where I'm staying, or from Delhi to Dharamsala, because I'm not even in Delhi yet. Okay, so I say, let's say my ultimate goal is Dharamsala. Okay, so that's my ultimate goal, and I have that in mind. But what I do today is I start with planning the trip. I start with buying the ticket and thinking about what I need and practicing my packing my suitcase. And then I, have to go from here to Spokane. Yeah, That's not the highest level path. It's, you go here to Spokane. And then once you get to Spokane, then you get on the plane and, there's some delays and, the plane doesn't leave when you want it to leave. And anyway, finally it goes. And then you have to go to Seattle and, you stop in Seattle for a while and, you go to Starbucks and so on, kind of your last Starbucks before you cross the ocean. And so, but the whole time you're doing this, your mind is thinking Dharamsala. Okay. Which is different than a person who is, who is thinking, I'm going to Seattle, but they're booking their tickets and, packing their suitcase and going to Spokane, but they're only thinking Seattle. Okay. So the whole time we're thinking Dharamsala. Yeah. Even though you're doing the same kind of initial practices, you have to do that. Okay. So these three levels or capacities of practitioners form the basic outline for the presentation of the teachings in this book. Certain meditations are prescribed to cultivate the motivation specific to each level, and other meditations to actualize the intended result of that motivation. The meditations on precious human life, death, and gross impermanence, and the possibility of taking an unfortunate rebirth help us generate the aspiration to have a fortunate rebirth. We attain such a rebirth by taking refuge in the three jewels and observing the law of karma. Okay, so the idea here is, if you're concerned about your next rebirth, you don't want a lower rebirth, you realize you need help, so you turn to the three jewels. This assumes you're kind of already a Buddhist, so taking refuge in the three jewels is not problematic, and the first advice you get from Buddha, Dharma, Sangha is keep good ethical conduct. Okay, in other words, observe the law of cause and effect. Okay. In this series of books, we didn't put refuge right after death and talking about other realms. We put it actually in with the path of the middle level being, because the path of the middle level being talks about the four truths. The last two truths, true cessation and true paths, are the Dharma refuge. Okay? So by understanding the four truths, that is helping you to already have a deeper understanding of what the Dharma refuge is, which helps you then to understand how it's possible for the Sangha to exist and for the Buddha to exist. Okay, so we rearranged the topics because most people who didn't grow up Buddhist many of them find the topic of refuge too difficult for them. It involves hearing all these qualities of the Buddha that are far beyond our experience, and it's kind of too much sometimes. And also because some people have, they were raised in other religions that they left because they saw hypocrisy or the religions didn't make sense or whatever. So they're coming into Buddhism and they're not so eager just to trust based on hearing marvelous qualities. Okay? And I know, when you hear the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, some of them sound really miraculous. And I always tell people, when they ask me, why did I become a Buddhist? I don't say because, there's so many miraculous qualities that for the Buddha Dharma Sangha, because if I was looking for miraculous qualities to base my faith on, there was no need to go to Buddhism. You cannot beat the parting of the Red Sea, can you? I mean, that's a pretty big one. If you're talking about miracles, you walk up, the Red Sea parts, you walk across, it closes again. You go up to some mountain, there's a burning bush, and you hear the voice of God. There's enough miracles. You talk about virgin birth, okay? So there's plenty of miracles, and in Western religions, it can't be miracles that we base our faith in. Okay, so that's why I think learning about the Dharma refuge in conjunction with learning about the Four Truths really allows us to get a better grasp on exactly what it is we're taking refuge in. Yeah, and why we take refuge. Okay. Okay. So, okay. Meditations on the first two of the Four Truths inspire the aspiration for liberation within us. Did I read that already? Generating true paths by practicing the three higher trainings will bring about true cessations and liberation. That's the middle level. Then meditation on the 7-point cause and effect instructions and the meditation on equalizing and exchanging self and others are the methods to generate bodhicitta, the aspiration for full awakening to benefit all sentient beings. The method that leads to awakening is the practice of the 6 perfections, 4 ways of gathering disciples, and Vajrayana. Okay, and so then there's the chart on the following page, on page 175. Okay, so the level of practitioner, the meditations that lead you to generate that motivation, what the motivation is, and then the practices done to actualize the result of that motivation. So that's the standard way that the Lamrim is set up. What we've changed is take refuge in the 3 jewels, which is now practices done to actualize the result of the initial level motivation. That has been moved down a box, okay? Yeah. What else did we change? The rest is pretty much the same. Yeah, some different emphasis. Yeah, in the series, because the Lamrim goes very quickly through the middle level beings practice, exceedingly quickly. Like, don't sneeze because you'll miss it. In the volumes of this series, we really go into depth in that. And since the middle level being is talking about the 3 higher trainings, the second of which is concentration, we brought the whole explanation of how to develop concentration or meditative stability, which is usually found in the Lamrim under the practices of the 6 perfections of the advanced practitioner. We brought that whole description into the higher training of concentration, so that was explained in volume 4 according to both the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition. Yeah, both ways of explaining how to generate concentration. So that was also a big change, and then explaining the middle path in much more depth.
Because that middle book of the Lamrim is so deceptive,
Middle path.
But it's also the middle book and the three
right.
English in the three
Yeah.
three volumes of the English translation. So when in the Geshe studies, where do they study Lojong? Where you do, where you're getting all the afflictive study of all the afflictions. Where does it fall?
I don't think they do the Lojong studies per se in the Geshe studies. They'll do the bodhicitta, which will include a lot of the Lojong. But the Lojong, the mind training, has particular kind of pithy instructions about how to transform adversity into the path.
Not necessarily against the afflictions. The Lojong, those thought training.
The thought trainings are against the afflictions. They usually include thought training with the advanced level practice. But you asked how it was included in the Geshe studies, and I don't think they study the Lojong texts there, because they're going through, first they go through the collective topics and the low rig and tar rig and Abbey Samaya Alankara, and then, they do those books. And the Lojong texts they were written after most of those treatises, okay? So very often what the monks will do, similarly with Tantra, that's not included usually in the Geshe studies, although now they're starting to, many of them will go to Tantra college after that. But usually what they'll do is their main program is the Geshe studies, and then in the break time they'll go when His Holiness teaches Lamrim or give initiation. Actually, they're discouraged from taking initiations while they're doing the Geshe studies. Because when you take initiations, then you have a lot of commitments and you don't have time for your studies and debate. So they're really discouraged from that. Okay, so there are two types of initial capacity practitioners, one superior and the other inferior. So superior initial capacity practitioners seek higher rebirth as a human or a celestial being. Although they also seek the betterment of this life, their main focus is to create the causes for fortunate future rebirths. Lesser initial capacity practitioners think only of the betterment of this life and do not prepare for future lives, although they may still create virtuous karma through being generous, living ethically, and so on. And so their good deeds, even though they don't have the motivation for a good rebirth, can still bring about a good rebirth. But if you have the motivation of a good rebirth, there's a better chance that those actions will bring about that result. Okay? So 2 levels of initial level practitioner.
I thought if you didn't have the intention for, if your intention was just based on this life, that was not considered Dharma practice.
It's not considered Dharma practice, but you still create virtue. So don't confuse, don't think that that you have to cross that line into Dharma practice in order to create virtue. Ordinary people, non-Buddhists, and so forth can also create virtue.
Yeah, but in here it calls it 2 types of initial capacity practitioners.
Right. So there's 2 types. One who work only for the betterment of this life, but they also create virtue, and that virtue can ripen in a good rebirth. And then another type of initial level practitioner that has the Dharma motivation of seeking a future life. So there are 2 levels of beings within the initial level.
But only one of them is a Dharma practitioner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But don't get stuck up thinking you're a Dharma practitioner, because if you look at your motivation all day long, how much do we really even create a Dharma motivation before we do our virtuous actions? Okay? So, yeah. Okay, yeah, because that can be a very confusing point. It usually comes up quite often. You mean people who aren't Buddhist, who don't strive for a rebirth, they're automatically going to the lower realms because they don't create virtue? No, that's not accurate. They can create virtue. Okay, some of them are better than the Buddhists. Yeah. I mean, they may not believe in future rebirth, but they keep better ethical conduct than some of the Buddhists who are saying, want to kill the Rohingya or whatever. Yeah. So you can't get stuck up thinking, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I'm superior to others, because it's a real individual thing how a person practices. Those of you who grew up in cultures where the belief in rebirth is not prevalent may initially come to Buddhism with the motivation simply to improve the quality of this life. How many of you came to Buddhism with that motivation? All of us, yeah? Okay. At the moment, you are ordinary initial level individuals who would like to experience less stress and anger, better relationships, improved health, and more peace of mind in this life. Yeah? That's what most people want, isn't it? And you look to the Buddha's teachings as a way to that end. So that's good. You buy a mindfulness app and you do, you meditate every morning with your mindfulness app and it helps you. Yeah, your mind calms down, you're a little bit nicer, okay? But you don't have to think about, future rebirth and all these kinds of difficult topics, okay? By using the Dharma to become a more balanced person, you will engage in fewer destructive actions and more constructive ones. Okay, so that's good. The person may not know about karma, they may not know about future lives, but you're helping them not to create so much negative karma and to create some positive karma. As time goes on, you will learn about the existence of future lives, cyclic existence, liberation, awakening, and the paths leading to them. As you think about these topics and gain conviction in them, your perspective will expand and you will want to create the causes to have a peaceful death and a good rebirth. Because that's the next most urgent thing that people think of. I want a happy life, but yeah, I'm aware that I'm going to die. And, maybe be reborn. So that's the next most urgent thing. How can I at least have a peaceful death? Okay? Because I don't know if I'm even going to have health care. And, I don't know if hospice service is going to be available. And I don't know if I'm going to have dementia. And so how can I prepare for death? Then you will become aware of the dangers of cyclic existence and aspire to free yourself from it. So this is as you're learning more. Okay? As your heart opens to others more and more, the thought of attaining awakening for the benefit of all beings will grow in your heart. In this way, you will progress on the path in an organic way. Okay? So that's why we need all sorts of Buddhist centers, all sorts of teachers, because people are at different levels, So, we need the people who teach Dharma light. Yeah, because those people teach that, the people who practice it benefit, then maybe they start thinking, oh, I heard that comes from Buddhism. What's Buddhism about? Then they start learning about Buddhism, and they start thinking more deeply about some of these other topics, and they progress in that way. Okay? While Buddhism speaks about the importance of preparing for future lives, this does not mean we should disregard this life. Some people, they hear about Buddhists, Buddhism, I want to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Everything I do is according to the 8 worldly concerns. That's awful. I've got to stop the 8 worldly concerns. I'm packing my bags, including my electric toothbrush and a heater and a warm sleeping bag and my iPad, and I'm going up to the mountains and going to live in a cave, and I'm going to attain enlightenment. Okay? This is what all of us who first met the Dharma in India, except we didn't have iPods and iPads then, that they didn't exist. But, we were like, this is fantastic. This is wonderful. We want to attain enlightenment ASAP. Yeah. And these are fantastic lamas. They're teaching us the whole path. And all we have to do is sit down and meditate, and we're going to do it this lifetime. Okay? And then, as Venerable Sangha Kadro puts it, she says, the more I learned about the path, the more I realized it's going to take longer than this lifetime. Yeah? But we started out with this amazing idealism, and we were all going to do this, And then the first crack, I remember, in that vision, was when Lama asked one of the monks, he was a Dutch monk, to open a business in Kathmandu, an export business, to support the Sangha. I was like, oh, he's going to work exporting things to sell? I'm not doing that, But I'm going to follow my Lama, whatever my Lama says. And then for me, what happened, because I was going to stay in India, forget about America, and, I was going to stay there and meditate and become a Buddha. And then I got sent to Italy. Venerable Elizabeth walked by me during one tea break and said, oh, Lama thinks it'd be very good if you went to Italy, and kept walking. Okay, so slowly these kind of cracks appeared, and then we began to realize that the path is going to take a little bit longer than we initially thought. Yeah, just a little bit longer. Yeah, so he'll run his export business. He'll make $1 million. Then he'll go to the cave, and I'll go to Italy a short time and then come back to India and go to my cave. Okay? But we're all going to become awakened this lifetime. Yeah, because Lama said so. We can do it. Okay? Yeah, and my big lesson in Italy was I have a lot of anger. Yeah? And it's going to be hard to become a Buddha if you have anger. Because you got to generate bodhicitta to become a Buddha. And if you have a lot of anger, that interferes with generating bodhicitta. So, if only I could get all these sentient beings to act better, then I wouldn't have so much anger. Then I could generate bodhicitta. Okay, so, it takes you a while to learn. Okay. If we want to have a favorable future lives, properly taking care of this life by being an honest person who refrains from harming or cheating others is important. By keeping good ethical conduct, we will have fewer problems in this life and will create the causes for fortunate future lives. Okay, so that's good. The paths practiced by these 3 levels of practitioners are not separate paths. One person passes through all 3 stages as he or she progresses. To remove the cognitive obscurations preventing full awakening, we first must remove afflictive obscurations and free ourselves from the sufferings of cyclic existence. To attain liberation by severing the afflictions from their root, we must first rein in the attachment to the happiness of this life, which stimulates us to engage in the 10 destructive paths of action. Okay? So that's the first thing to start to give up, is attachment to the happiness of this life. And that's the demarcation between a Dharma action and a non-Dharma action, is whether it's motivated only by the attachment to the happiness of this life. In this life, in this way, the practitioners of initial, middle, and advanced capacities refer to one person at 3 different times in their spiritual journey. Such a practitioner gradually and sequentially develops the 3 levels, each one indispensable for those that follow. Okay, so it's a gradual path, and there's no shortcut. Okay, you got to develop the whole thing, and you can't skip. But again, how each of us does that, some of us may do some of the more advanced practitioner practices, and in that way it may help us develop the realizations of the middle level, so there's ways in which, don't get the idea that it's absolutely serial like this, and you can't progress to the next stage until you absolutely realize each one of the Dharma things in order. Don't think like that, because as you learn the whole path, what you learn about the let's say the bodhicitta teachings will help you develop a much greater appreciation and understanding of a precious human life. Okay, and what you learn about the sufferings of samsara in the middle will help you generate bodhicitta as an advanced practitioner. So all these different stages, they influence each other. Yeah. So we have to realize all of them, but don't have a very narrow mind of, I can only study this and I can't study any of the rest of them because I haven't done this. Okay? But you learn everything, and as you do, you really see how there's a lot of crossover and how different parts of the path stimulate you and inspire you to understand other parts of the path. Okay, on the other hand, the practice for each of these 3 individuals is complete. If at present we wish only for a fortunate rebirth, we will find a complete method to actualize our aspiration in the path of the initial capacity practitioner. On the basis of first practicing the initial level, middle level practitioners will find a complete path to fulfill their aspirations for liberation in the practice of the middle level. Okay? If we seek full awakening, we will proceed through all 3 stages by first practicing the first 2 stages, which will lead us to practice the advanced path. Okay? So according to what your aspiration is, you can also find a complete path for whatever it is you want to attain spiritually in either the initial level practice, the middle, or the advanced capacity practice. Okay? For advanced practitioners, the first 2 paths are said to be paths in common with initial capacity practitioners and middle capacity practitioners, because they are not exclusively for the initial and middle capacity practitioners. So, if you're aspiring for liberation, then on the basis of the initial capacity person, you also do the practice of the middle capacity person. Okay? Your practice of the initial capacity, you're doing it in common with initial capacity people, but you're not doing just the initial capacity practice because your aim is the middle capacity. Okay? So if your aim is for full awakening, then you also do the initial level practice in common with that. You do the middle level practice, and you're practicing in common with the middle level practitioners, and then you're doing the advanced level practice. Okay? So if you practice the initial level, but you're doing it in common with the initial level because you're actually aimed for full awakening, it's going to influence how you practice the initial level, isn't it? Yeah, you're doing the same practices in common, but your motivation is really different. And how you look at those practices you're doing is going to be different because you already have part of your higher level aspiration in your mind, and you want to go in that direction. Hey, is this making sense to people? Okay.
I think, for example, when you practice a sadhana, it becomes clear there because you know how a sadhana is structured and the integration of lamrim and starting basically with refuge, the four measurables, and having the concentration practices there too, and wisdom. So it's all 3 levels, and I feel like
so your sadhana practice is actually an advanced level practice.
Yes.
Yeah, but you can see that it includes so many of the practices from the initial middle level practices in it, which is why you need to master the initial and middle level practices. Otherwise, when you get to Tantra, you don't know what to do. Yeah, you're kind of lost. So in common with also indicates that advanced practitioners aiming for full awakening do not practice the initial and middle paths exactly the same way as initial and middle level practitioners do. While initial level practitioners are satisfied with aspiring to improve the quality of their lives in cyclic existence, practitioners aiming for full awakening have a more extensive aspiration right from the beginning. Okay. Although they lack the realization of bodhicitta, they do all the initial and middle level practices with some degree of bodhicitta. Okay, so that's in their mind. The I'm going to Dharamsala is in your mind, even though you're in the car that's driving to Spokane. Okay? Okay, we'll go through the rest of this section. As a commentary on the Lamp of the Path, Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo followed Atisha's presentation. The Sakya tradition also follows Atisha's sequence when it presents abandoning the 4 attachments. The first Sakya patriarch, Sachen Kunga Ningpo, in parting from the 4 clingings, says, if you cling to this life, you are not a Dharma practitioner. If you cling to 3 realms, that is not renunciation. If you cling to self-interest, you are not a bodhisattva. If grasping arises, it is not the view. Okay. Here we begin by freeing ourselves from the 8 worldly concerns that focus on the happiness of only our present life. So that's if you cling to this life, you are not a Dharma practitioner. By abandoning them, you will become an actual Dharma practitioner. We then cultivate renunciation of samsara and the determination to be free from birth in all 3 samsaric realms. Contemplating that all other sentient beings So that's if you cling to 3 realms, that is not renunciation. That's middle practitioner being. Contemplating that all other sentient beings suffer in samsara just as we do, we broaden our perspective and generate the altruistic intention of bodhicitta. To fulfill bodhicitta's aim of attaining full awakening, we must gain the correct view of the 2 truths and abandon all grasping at the 2 extremes of inherent existence and total non-existence by realizing emptiness. Okay, so that's if you cling to self-interest, you are not a bodhisattva, and if grasping arises, it is not the view. In this way, this short verse from the Sakyapas reflects the same approach of the 3 ascending levels of motivation for Dharma practice presented by Atisha. Okay, now here, this part is interesting. The 5th century Theravada Pali tradition master, Buddhaghosa, thought along the same lines when he described inferior, medium, and superior levels of ethical conduct. So his book, okay, the Visuddhimagga, is standard fare for the Theravada teachings. We learn the Tibetans think Theravadas don't aspire for full awakening. Yeah, they just want liberation. Listen to what Buddhaghosa says and see if that preconception is correct or not. That ethical conduct motivated by craving, the purpose of which is to enjoy continued existence, is inferior. That practice, that ethical conduct, practice for the purpose of one's own deliverance, is medium. The virtue of the perfections, or parami, practice for the deliverance of all sentient beings, is superior. Quoted from one of the basic texts followed in the Theravada tradition. Okay, ethical conduct, is 1st chapter, verse 33. Okay, ethical conduct and other Dharma practices motivated by a desire for a good rebirth and cyclic existence, while virtuous, are inferior. Practices done with the wish to liberate ourselves from cyclic existence are excellent, but not supreme. The perfections that are done with the wish to liberate all sentient beings are superior. While initially our motivation may be limited, as our wisdom and compassion expand, our motivation will as well. Okay, so we will stop here and continue next Friday night. Yeah?
I haven't been to that many Western monastic gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the people that I spoke to who are Theravadan practitioners,
Mm-hmm.
they don't seem to have that view. So I wonder, in your experience, Venerable, is this view quite common or on the rare side?
It's more on the rare side, yeah. But it's there, at least in the scriptures, yeah. And they do point out different people as bodhisattvas, you know.
A few days ago, a few of us were having a discussion. It was on Saturday, and we were talking about at what level practitioner do you have? Do you stop having to purify negative karma? And
When you become a Buddha.
yeah, because there's the discussion of our hearts they're liberated, but they still negative karma can ripen for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and eighth level bodhisattvas are out of samsara, but they still do purification practices. Okay. Yeah, all the way up to awakening, you purify and create merit. So you're kind of thinking, oh, let's see, if I get there, then I can stop saying Vajrasattva. Oh, what a relief. You know, then I can go to bed earlier every night.